Hello and welcome back to Guild Wars 2! We're going to be talking about classes today, and we're going to start off with the Engineer, which is my first class that I got to max, and the class that I enjoy playing the most. We're going to talk about the Core Engineer, as well as each of the elite specs, and we're going to do a video like this on each of the classes, of course, once I have them all leveled up, which may take a little while, because it's just Engineer that I have maxed out right now. Engineer is a very interesting class, and kind of different than a lot of the classes you're going to find in regular MMOs, though definitely not the most unique in this game. Engineer has a tool belt mechanic that we're going to get into in just a little bit, and Engineer has access to, at base, the kind of lacking weapon options, probably because of the toolkits, of rifle, pistol, and shield, and then, of course, harpoon gun for underwater. Now, the way that it works is that when you're playing Engineer, you have access to a bunch of different toolkits that give you a bunch of different options. These will be like a flamethrower that allows you to put out quite a bit of damage, and also because of your different perks that you're able to choose in your talent trees, you can get quite a bit of extra damage because of the flamethrower. That is one that I love to run when I'm running Core Engineer. Although, you know, hey, it doesn't hurt to have it on with at all times. Extra might when you're holding a flamethrower is very, very good. Then, of course, you also have things like grenades, which is the most damage that I think you could do on Core Engineer, and also maybe the most damage you can do on like Holosmith still, and some of the other builds as well. But a very cool kit that gives you a lot of different options. You have a wrench kit that lets you do some cool stuff, like throw down caltrops and hit with a wrench and do some stunning concussions. You have a healing kit that allows you to heal, as you would expect. And you also have things like a bomb kit, which works kind of like the grenade kit, and, you know, kind of feels superfluous, but it's whatever. And, of course, for your heavy version of it, you have the elite mortar kit. You also have things like potions that allow you to transform into other things, get different buffs, get healing like that. You have turrets that you can throw down that do pretty good damage, and honestly, add up quite a bit over time. And you have a lot of different little options when it comes to how you want to spec, though I find the kits to be the most useful. Again, your weapon choices are kind of limited, so you're not going to have a lot you can do there. The basic rifle moveset is pretty solid and includes a really nice jump, lets you cover a lot of ground really quickly. And you have, of course, your tool belt skills. Whatever toolkits you have equipped on your bar, or whatever other options you have equipped on your bar, let you activate a bunch of different skills, which can be very helpful. Things like extra burning when you hit, or extra grenades that you can throw out. And you can also have a setup where you get extra damage when you use tool belt skills in the form of electricity that can proc, things like that. It's pretty solid, though honestly, once I got access to a lot of the other elite specs, I didn't really mess with Core Engineer at all, because I think most of those other abilities are great, although I do still have Flamethrower Kit and a couple of the other kits equipped on some of my elite specs. Finally, for Base Engineer, let's not forget to talk about the gadgets. The gadgets are such a cool idea, and I find them almost completely worthless, to be honest with you. Things like a personal battering ram that you can fire off, that's cool. Boom. Battering ram. The ability to, like, leap forward with the boots is really cool, but honestly, they're just not as good as the kits, which is really unfortunate, because the kits are great and shine. It can be used with all the elite specs, just like everything else that I'm talking about right now, which is why we're covering all of it right now. But it's not as good in my opinion. Like, that's cool. I can fire a personal battering ram. Great. I can shoot forward on gadget shoes, or I can equip some goggles that make it harder for me to be blinded. I can't be blind. I can remove blindness. It's all cool, but I don't know, man. I think their best use is honestly underwater for the most part. When it comes to Core Engineer, I think Core Engineer is very good. I think you can still run Core Engineer. You can still help people out with Core Engineer. Rocket Boots is fun, but I can also just do that with 5 on the rifle. And I never really ran Pistol Engineer all that much. I don't like Pistol Engineer that much, mostly because I don't think the offhand skills are very good, and I don't like Shield Engineer really all that much at all. I think the elite specs versions of the Shield are a little bit better, but rifle is what really shines for me as Engineer, and it's what I mostly play. Now, when we get into our elite specs, we're going to start off here with Scrapper, which is right here, and re-equip all my stuff. When we're looking at Scrapper, we have a brand new weapon that's been introduced, which is Hammer. Hammer gives us a lot of cool new abilities we can play around with. Let's get some enemies over here. And with Hammer, we now have access to gadgets. So Hammer gives us that nice hammer swing that lets us jump in. We have this spin here. We have an AoE electric move that just got interrupted by getting frozen. We have a block, which is very nice and very handy. And there's the electricity. We also have our new utility gadget. And of course, we can still use our kits whenever we want, which is great. I love that you can mix and match in between those. So we're going to put our gyros on here to show those off. With our gyros, we now have the ability to do a lot of other cool stuff. We have medic gyro, which will heal people. We're going to go and use function gyro here. Stealth gyro. I have a grenade kit equipped so that I can use it for the extra damage. There we go with medic gyro, and of course we can heal because of that. And we have, of course, shredder gyro, which attacks foes in the area. Blast gyro, which does a big, nice blast. And we're just going to take this guy out. Focus on reading all this and forgetting he was doing damage to us. And we still have, of course, our shield that we can use. And sneak gyro, which lets us do some nice stealth stuff. Now, what I love most about the gyros, and it's what makes shredder gyro, it's what makes Scrapper so cool, in my opinion, is that these follow you around. These are wells that walk with you. So you always have the function of these as you move around the battlefield. And because you give super speed to your allies, you're just constantly making everyone faster while buffing everyone around you, and it feels really, really satisfying. I like Scrapper a lot. Scrapper is a little bit more support-ish while also putting out quite a bit of damage. The ability to just leap forward like that, as you can see, is very nice. But you're able to support your allies while also doing a considerable amount of damage. And even in situations like this where I'm getting tossed around, it looks like I might get taken out, I'm kind of still okay, because I know people are coming to help here thinking I'm in trouble, but I'm kind of still okay because I can self-heal, and I have my gyros, and I can deflect damage. It's really not that hard for me to recover from a pretty bad situation on Scrapper. And Scrapper is my go-to in most instance content. If I go into something like a Fractal, I'm probably going to be running Scrapper, because I know for a fact a lot of other people are going to be running DPS. And if I can bring in Scrapper for the support and keep them up and res them using my function gyro, then we're set. We're good. We don't have anything else to worry about. Now, when it comes to Scrapper, I do think that Scrapper does a little bit less damage than the other two. And when I say a little bit, I mean quite a bit when it comes to things like Mechanist. But where the fun comes for Scrapper to me is that I'm still doing good DPS while having all of the support options. And that's what really makes Scrapper shine for me. Now, Holosmith gives us access to the sword to go along with our shield, and it's a pretty good sword. I like the moveset quite a bit, but I think the moveset gets a lot better once we get into the special mechanic that Holosmith has. But the sword moves are pretty solid. We do get a bunch of new abilities, heat-based abilities that we can use on our hotbar. But we can still, of course, use our toolkits and anything like that. So I normally still run Flamethrower on here for the extra burning, and because it just seems thematic with Holosmith, because it's all based around heat and fire, you know. But when it comes to the actual abilities that Holosmith gets, it's all based around this heat mechanic that comes from the Photon Forge. And the Photon Forge is such a cool, fun thing to play around with that it makes me wish Holosmith was just a little bit better because of how much I love playing it. So we activate the Forge, and we get a brand new moveset that generates heat as we use it. Now, this heat we can spend as well. Not spend as in we lower the gauge, but spend as in once we get to certain heat thresholds, we can do different abilities. And as our heat gets higher, we do more damage as well. We don't want to overheat, because if we overheat, I'm going to go ahead and show it here for the sake of those that are watching. If we overheat, which as you can see, it takes a little while when you're not using any extra abilities, then we lose access to the Forge, and we take a bunch of burning damage, so we don't want that. But when our heat's high, all of these other light-based abilities do extra damage. Now, you can run Sword Holo, and Sword Holo is absolutely fine. The sword moveset is really good. The leap forward that it gets and the ranged attack are great. They're a lot of fun to use. However, I prefer Rifle Holo, and sometimes switch up Flamethrower Kit for Grenade Kit to push DPS, because that's what Holosmith is. Holosmith is DPS. Holosmith doesn't have a lot of the other fancy fun stuff that it can do. Its heal doesn't really work for other people. It's mostly just, hey, do you want a deeps? Well, then let's deeps. And where it comes with the deeps is really, really good. The DPS on Holosmith is great. You can burst down stuff so quickly on Holo. And you do have a little bit of support that you can do with your different Corona-based abilities. You have your... I just realized it's probably going to get demonetized. Well, that's unfortunate. You have things like a barrier, a spectrum shield that you can put up. You have a photon wall for a defensive barrier. But I normally go for the laser disc because it looks cool, and the hard light arena because it gives a bunch of buffs inside it, which do work for allies as well. So it's not like you don't have any support. And then, of course, I just love the Prime Light Beam. That is such a cool ability. But that's what Holosmith is straight DPS in a lot of ways. And I love that. I think that when I'm going to play a DPS class, Holosmith is what I'm going to fall to, even among the other classes in the game. There are a lot of them that are really fun to play as, but Holosmith just really shines for me because I love the mechanic of having to play around the, hey, how much heat do I have right now? I'm going to do extra damage if I have this heat, but I don't want to take damage because I have this heat. So I got to be a little bit more careful, and I think it just really is fun to play in that regard. Lastly, we have Mechanist, and Mechanist gives us the mace, which looks really cool and has a lot of cool abilities to it. When I say a lot, I mean 3, but they look really cool. While also giving us the ability to have the shield, or, again, you can have a pistol in the offhand if you want. But, for me, I go with the shield because when I'm playing Mechanist, I want to be a little bit more supporty, and that gives me the option to have a little bit more survivability, which is the same reason why I run it with Holosmith, though not for the support, for the survivability. Mechanist, of course, gives us the mech, and the mech is very good. It's sometimes too good, and you will probably have people look at you funny if you have a mech out. But you know what? Who cares? You have a mech, and your character yells out Rocket Punch when you press 3 sometimes, and then your mech fires 1 too, and that's just really cool. Now, much like Holosmith, I prefer to run Rifle on Mechanist, and that's mostly for the way that everything works together with the aim-assisted rocket, which does quite a bit of damage. It's right here, aim-assisted rocket. As long as you have pretty high crit rate, and I have spec'd into crit rate on this build. I'm doing, but I didn't mean to click on that. I'm doing quite a bit of damage most of the time, and the mech is kind of ancillary. When I started the build, the mech was doing most of the damage, but now it's me. I'm the damage. And what I like about the mech, you can see I have all the passives on here, is that it really just lets me boil down to, hey, I like the combat in this game. It's not fancy. It's not special compared to like a Holosmith, but it's just, hey, let's go. Let's do damage. Let's kill stuff. And you can use, of course, the buffs with your Mech 2 ability that you get instead of your toolbar. Or tool belt, that is. But you also have raw damage that you can make it do. You have an AoE that you can make it do, which is pretty solid. But again, most of the time I use it to buff me and everyone else around me while I'm doing my rifle damage. And the signets that you get are pretty solid. The ability to heal yourself, the ability to move very quickly, all of a sudden get that jump forward. The biggest one for me is probably the barrier, because you get just a shield around you. And the knockback is okay. I mostly just use that for damage. And then, of course, the beam is really cool. We'll show the beam off before we stop here. But for the most part, I just use signets for passives and just focus on my crit damage. Focus on my aim-assisted rocket damage. And I do more damage with this than I do with my Holo right now, which is kind of sad. I miss when my Holosmith was my big DPS class. But Holosmith has a lot more fun mechanics to play around with when it comes to that. So Mechanist for me is, I don't want to worry too much. I just want to focus, maybe I'm doing story content. I want to have that extra benefit of having a pet out that could res me by killing the thing that I'm trying to kill that I probably got really low before it killed me. But I don't want to have to think too much because I'm enjoying the story and I just want to focus on that. That's Mechanist for me. Buff me up, do a bunch of damage, get to keep going with what I'm working on right now. If I'm farming something, I'm playing Mechanist. And it's kind of a shame because I feel thematically the mech should get to do more cool stuff, right? Instead of just being a buff bot for me. But I do think that the beam is really cool and the fact that it can support me is really nice. So for me, I don't mind so much that the mech doesn't have like crazier stuff that it can do, especially when we compare it to stuff like Ranger, because it's just a cool, fun pet class that keeps me alive while I murder things with my rifle. Obviously, there's more to say about all three of these. Different ways you can build any one of them to be able to get different stuff going on. Like you could have the mech be melee, you could have the mech go for explosives and be able to pull your damage that way. With Scrapper, you could focus instead on your wells. I've got it focused mostly on, hey, I want extra stability and I want to give stability to my allies. But you can focus on things like disabling foes. There's a really cool disable build for Scrapper. And then, of course, for Holo, you can focus instead on, hey, maybe I do more damage and take less damage the more that my heat fills up, but my heat's going to fill up a little bit faster, things like that. There's a lot of different ways you can build each of these. And when we look at core, I didn't even get into the alchemy tree or the inventions tree. So there's a lot more you can do with each class. And I fully recommend that with engineer, you spend some time playing around with it and learning it. But this video was mostly, hey, what is my opinion on this class? How do I play this class? And do I think it's worth playing? And the answer is absolutely. I love engineer. It's my favorite class in this game so far. And I hope that you'll come back to watch the others of these as we get done with them. I know that I still have a long way to go for all of the others, but I have one elite spec for each class already fully maxed out, and I need to get the rest done. But let me know your thoughts on Engineer, which is your favorite spec to play, in the comment section down below. And until next time, I've been Trey. This has been the Full Spectrum. Remember to always enjoy the full spectrum. The Guild Wars 2 and the Engineer has to offer.